Okay, so I'm Sue McCoord. I'm a senior scientist at AgResearch based in Palmerston North and have worked with many of you in the room. So today I'm just going to tell you about a project that we did a couple of years ago focused on artificial lamb rearing systems. And the reason that we're interested in this is particularly for the dairy sheep industry, which is an emerging industry in New Zealand. It's growing, it will continue to grow. A large number of those lambs are artificially reared, and they become the future breeding animals, but are also reared for meat production, because all lambs are reared in those systems. And also we have a lot of artificial rearing of orphans on your traditional sheep and beef farms as well. Proteins are one of the most important nutrients for our young animals, and so one of the most important nutrients in our milk replacer. The source of protein has a significant influence on the quality of that protein for young animals in particular, especially in lambs in the first 3 weeks of life, because they don't have a rumen. So they rely 100% on the milk that they consume to enable them to grow, develop an immune system and to perform. But the high cost of those milk proteins is driving a change in the formulation of these milk replacers, particularly internationally. We're very lucky in New Zealand in that we actually have access to good quality protein sources, but internationally there's a lot of pressure on those ingredients. And so milk replacers are being formulated that have different types of protein in there, including a high proportion of whey rather than casein, which is a lower quality, but also from vegetable sources, so wheat and soy. And so the objective of this study was to evaluate the effect of a casein versus a whey-based milk replacer on the growth, health and survival of artificially reared lambs at commercial scale. So we removed some East Frisian 2 to 3 day old lambs. They were removed from their mum at that age so that they had colostrum from their mother, and they were proven to have had sufficient colostrum uptake. And they were randomly allocated to one of two groups. One was reared with casein-based milk replacer made from 100% bovine milk proteins and fats, and the other one was raised on a whey-based milk replacer. These are both commercially available. That was made from bovine whey, hydrolyzed wheat protein, and vegetable oil instead of milk fat. It was a replicated study. They were housed in pens 3 by 3 metres, 16 to 20 animals per pen and 8 pens per treatment. And the lambs were fed warm milk replacer through an automatic feeder on demand, so they could consume as much as they like. We weighed the lambs at entry and at exit, and in this study, the study time frame was 3 weeks. The reason for that is that those lambs were then transitioned outdoors and went into a single mob, and we didn't have our replication. So we haven't reported on that. We've reported on what happens in that first 3 weeks when milk is basically driving their performance. So, in terms of composition of the milk to start with, so comparing those two milk replacers to whole sheep milk powder, the whey-based milk replacer had a higher carbohydrate but lower protein, fat and lactose content, but the casein-based milk replacer had higher carbohydrate and lactose, slightly lower protein and slightly lower fat content. So there were some basically differences between those milk replacers. The most important difference, though, is when we compared the whey-based to the casein-based milk replacer itself. So the first point is really to say that no milk replacer will replicate sheep milk. They are different because they're made from bovine ingredients, right? But no two milk replacers are the same when you look at the formulations. So when you look at the whey-based versus casein-based milk replacer, the whey-based one had lower protein levels, lower fat levels, lower lactose levels, but greater carbohydrate content. They had less essential amino acids and less total amino acids by about 20%. There was 4 times less bovine milk protein in the whey-based milk replacer because it had the hydrolyzed wheat in there, and it was a lower quality. And of course, as I said before, the whey-based milk replacer had vegetable oil rather than milk fat in terms of its energy source. So just want to point...
You're one screen out of sync.
Oh, it's out of sync. Thank you for letting me know that, Sam. Apologies. I can't see the screen from underneath here.
You might move the chair over here.
Yeah, that would be quite helpful, actually. So in terms of the results, so the top line shows that there was nearly 3 times more mortality in the group reared on the whey-based milk replacer. There was significant difference in the amount of antibiotics that we used, which is reflecting the amount of health issues that we had in the lambs that were fed a whey-based milk replacer. Particularly scours was the main issue, which led to further issues around naval infections and lameness. And associated with the antibiotic treatments was also greater anti-inflammatory use. These were trends, but they were big enough trends that were quite important in terms of the welfare of those animals. Numerically, there was a difference in the incidence of pneumonia and lameness, but statistically it wasn't significant. But I think if we were to extend that out to a much larger scale, that may well change. In terms of growth rate, that was the big difference over and above the survival of those lambs. So the growth rates, what you're seeing there is in the green bars are the lambs that were reared on the casein-based milk replacer. The grey bars are the ones on the whey-based milk replacer. The first 2 here, these are male singles and twins, males, triplets and quads. So we separated them by litter size, and these are the females, singles and twins, and then triplets and quads. So the first thing that you see is the ones that were reared on the casein-based milk replacer grew a lot faster, despite whether they were a male or a female or a single, twin or triplet. The other thing that was interesting is that there was an interaction between the type of milk replacer and litter size, in that it was the singles and twins that actually had the poorer performance on the whey-based milk replacer. So what that's telling us is that we weren't actually meeting the requirements of those animals. They were growing slower, but they were more adversely affected because our singles and twins have got a higher requirement compared to our triplets and our quads. The intake of milk replacer was similar. It was a little bit different here, and I don't have any stats around that because we only were able to measure total consumption of milk replacer, not on a per pen basis. And I've put the starter intake up there to basically demonstrate that these little lambs weren't really consuming much starter. So that was, the overall starter intake, and these are pre-ruminant animals, so that's not surprising that it was very low. So, key conclusions from this work. Lambs can be reared on both the milk replacers, without a doubt. But there are some trade-offs when we're using poorer quality milk replacers. And those trade-offs are related to the survival, the growth and the health of our young lambs. The lambs that are fed milk replacer formulated from 100% milk ingredients, both the proteins and the fat, is recommended because we do get the better growth rate and the better health for our lambs. So the real key message here for our rearers is to consider the quality of the feeds that we're actually putting into our systems to be able to support the performance of the lambs that we want. The results from this work have been reinforced in other studies where we've looked at different levels of substitution of different types of protein and vegetable oil, and it's basically on a spectrum of if you had the really poor quality proteins and fats, we get the poorest performance, but we can improve their performance the closer we get to having 100% milk ingredients in the milk replacers. And I just wanted to acknowledge Spring Sheep for undertaking this work on farm. So this was done on a commercial farm with commercial people. Mike Agnew for the protein analysis, and John and Brian for their amino acid profiling, and also for the MB Dairy Sheep program that funded this work as well. And just finishing with a lamb rearing guide that's freely available online if you're wanting a little bit more information. I understand it's also on the Beef and Lamb website, thank you, Aaron, for anyone wanting more information about feeds or lamb rearing in general. Thank you.